Thanks for tuning in, guys. Today we talked to a gymnastics gym owner. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'm really excited about our next guest. This has been a long time coming. I was at his gym where my daughters participate and thought to myself, man, I'd love to get Tyler on the show. And like any successful businessman, he's extremely busy. So I'm grateful that Tyler was able to carve some time out for us. Tyler's an interesting fella. I think you're going to really enjoy this. He is a Christ follower, a husband, a father, a business owner, decorated athlete, and he's got some really cool insight into the gymnastics, tumbling, trampoline industry. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with him. Tyler, before we get started, let's just do a quick introduction. Tell me who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it for.
Absolutely. My name is Tyler Terrell. I am currently 37, and I opened Apex Tumbling in August of 2011. So that puts us a little plus 14 years here.
All right. So you have it's an interesting profession, one of many, but to focus on Apex, you've got a background in gymnastics and tumbling, quite an impressive bio, and you seem like the kind of guy that probably wouldn't volunteer a lot of this, but can you just give us a background about you and some of your experience in the tumbling gymnastics arena?
Of course. Yep, I'm a trained tumbler and trampolinist. It's a fun story. It's very long, so I won't get into it now, but I was actually trained in the building that Apex is in now. It was built to be a tumbling and trampoline gym, and I started there when I was 13, so it's just a little bit late, but I took to it, and within 6 months, I knew I wanted to own a gym someday, and I had completely fallen in love with the sport. I went on to win, 15-plus state championships, a bunch of regional championships, was named to the regional all-star 3 times, have 3 national championships. I was an elite athlete later on, and I also have a Guinness World Record that is tumbling and trampoline related.
Nice. My daughter was participating in one of y'all's classes, and I got to watch the video of you. Was that Good Morning America, or you were on national television when you did the?
It was live with Regis and Kelly.
There you go. Yeah, very cool. And you were a little bit younger. You looked a little bit younger when you were on TV.
I was. It was a month after I opened the gym, so September 2011.
Perfect.
And it was great. It was great advertising, publicity that people had seen that, and the newspaper did a write-up about it. It was really fun.
Is that a common thing for gymnasts to make that transition into business owner, or is that seems like a completely different skill set people would need to have? Were you intimidated at all making that decision to open a gym?
Boy, that's a good question. There are obviously, in any industry or sport, there's always going to be a particular element or group of people that want to stay there forever. It's kind of like, it's kind of like school. Some people never want to leave, so they become teachers. The plan was for me to open a gym, and funnily enough, that was the dream from about 16 to 19, and I had given it up by 19 because I couldn't figure out how to do it without going $1 million into debt, which I deemed to be unwise. And I'm sure if I had tried, nobody in their right mind would have lent me the money anyways.
Yeah, and I feel like just you being in the industry leaned yourself to a lot of just kind of nuances that are required. But I think it's always interesting to talk to people. You go to dentist school, but they don't spend a lot of time on how to run a dentist business. And I would imagine it's the same for your skill set, making that transition. I bet the learning curve was pretty steep.
It is. It's still going. The learning curve is never ending if you do it properly.
For someone who might be interested in doing something like this, you've had the background, but in your opinion, and I'm sure you network with other gyms and have relationships with other gym owners, what qualifications do you think would be needed to open up a tumbling, trampoline, gymnastics, cheer location and make it successful?
Yeah, so there's no specific government regulations or licenses that you have to open a gym. I know people that have opened tumbling and trampoline gyms or any kind of athletic gym, and as long as you are not competitive, you don't have to have any requirements at all. You put out a sign, rent a facility, and do a good job, and you're up and running. Equipment costs notwithstanding. But there are some USA Gymnastics requirements if you're going to be competitive. There are lots of certifications that you can get that are helpful. The business side of things is always the big question mark, though. On the gymnastics side, if you're a good coach, if you run a good organization, if you can train good staff, then the market will notice that and people will be happy there. So it's just kind of make it or break it. If you have what it takes and you're a good place for families and their kids, then nobody cares what certifications you have. If you're bad and people don't want to bring their kids to you, it doesn't really matter what certifications you have. So I've always leaned towards businesses that don't require a whole lot of government oversight.
Sure. Talk to me a little bit about when you say if you're competitive. So is that like a declaration that you make or you announce like, hey, we're a competitive gym and therefore fall under these regulations, or how does that work?
No, you become a member of whatever organizing body, is required to be a member of the competitions, and then you can just sign up your team and your athletes for the competitions. Yeah.
When you were thinking about being a coach, or a coach and wanting to open up a location, how much did geography play into your decision making? Because Pilot Point, I would consider it somewhat rural still compared to Frisco or Richardson or somewhere. How did that compete, and what kind of challenges did you have with just the geographical location of Apex?
It's part of that long story I referred to earlier, but basically there was a lady who had grown up next door to the man who invented the trampoline in Iowa, I believe, and married a cowboy from Pilot Point, Texas, moved here. Her name was Susie Thompson, and she was teaching flips in a cabinet shop. And somebody said, hey, for what you're paying the back of the cabinet shop for rent, you could probably build you a place. And she ended up doing that in, I think, 96, 97, somewhere in that neighborhood, and built our building. And hers was the gym that I became a part of when I was 13 and began training. Later on, worked for her as a coach. And then later on, she became my landlord, and we had a great relationship with very few issues for, 11, 12 years. And she is now with the Lord. I have new landlords, and they own the building, and I rent from them. It's a great arrangement. They run CrossFit on that side, and that blesses a lot of people. So we've got a lot of family fitness going on under one roof. But the facility really is a big deal. Where the facility is, the backstory to switching landlords here is that Susie was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which ended up taking her home to be with the Lord, and she was going to have to sell the gym. And that was a huge blow for me because that's where I run my business and had for 10, 11 years. But hey, that stinks, but cancer is a whole lot worse. So I looked into trying to find another place to run the gym, and I looked within a 50-mile radius, and there was no facility anywhere at any price that would have done it. So for trampolines, we really need those high ceilings and kind of a long, skinny building with tall ceilings, and that's pretty unusual. And so geography was not as much a limiting factor as was the building that would accommodate us bouncing 25, 30 feet in the air and doing those long tumbling runs.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sure you track the metrics. How far out are people traveling? How your clients to come to y'all's spot? Is it you got a pretty wide reach? Because I feel like, yeah, you could touch even up into Oklahoma if you wanted to, with what you're describing.
We do with tumbling and trampoline specifically. There's not a lot of competition directly here. So the next closest tumbling and trampoline gym is in Prosper, and then we're talking Frisco.
Yeah.
There's other gymnastic gyms in Denton, and there's some small cheer tumble gyms like Sanger, Munster, Gainesville. But we draw a couple of families from Gainesville, Sanger. We've had families from Salina for years. One of my original team athletes drove past 3 other gyms, tumbling and trampoline gyms. They were from Allen. They drove an hour and 20 minutes each way to get to me 4 nights a week for 7 years. So there's some pull, but most of it's pretty local. 90% of it is, within 15, 20 miles.
Is Apex associated with an organization? Are y'all considered competitive?
Yes, we are. We compete under the USA Gymnastics organization for tumbling and trampoline.
So it sounds like you've kind of got, and this is probably too generally broad, but I'm going to say it, 2 kind of sets of clientele, the kids and students that are showing up just to kind of be active and enjoy the community and the fun of jumping on trampolines and flexibility and stuff. And then you have the competitive athletes who are actually intentionally working to become better to compete on a bigger scale. Is that correct?
Correct. And it's about 90-10. So we call them our recreational students there in the gym, 1, 2, 3 hours a week versus our competitive athletes. So it's about 90% competitive, 90% recreational, 10% competitive. I don't like going above the 20% competitive. It is it's a much more intensive programming in terms of the coaching and the skill. It has to be a whole lot higher. There's a lot more management. So in the industry, people would say, you make your money on the rec kids, and the competitive program is something that you do because you love it.
Hey, so one of my issues with the podcast always is the all the options for rabbit holes, because I'm so interested in talking to people. So I'm gonna dive into a rabbit hole real quick, if you don't mind. This is more of a personal question. So you started gymnastics tumbling young, probably, I would assume, probably in that 90%, hey, just a rec kind of thing. When were you personally, did you make that shift, and how did that happen? Was it a coach reaching out and saying, hey, Tyler, you've got something special, or you just kind of kept at it and kept enjoying it? How do people make that transition from the 90 to the 10? What does that look like?
It depends. For me personally, I was 13. I had played all-star baseball, but was small for my age and a late grower. I didn't really grow until I was 14 and a half. And then it happened all in one summer, and then that was it. So I was small, and I was not hitting homers on the baseball team. I was a solid shortstop, third baseman. But I knew I didn't have a huge future in baseball. Plus, it was seasonal. You only did baseball in the spring or whatever. And I also had done some Taekwondo. I had actually gotten a black belt in Taekwondo. And they told me it was going to be over a year before I could test for my next belt. And I thought, well, holy smokes, I'm going to be a teenager by then. I'm going to be an old man. So we'll just take a break and figure out what I want to do. And I had done some gymnastics when I was a kid, but the gym in our area didn't have a boys specific program. And so it was a lot more recreational, and I was kind of growing out of the age where that would be fun. And wasn't quite challenging enough. My parents had some acquaintances that knew, my parents had friends who had girls who did something called power tumbling, and that sounded interesting to me, powerful. And so we looked into it, and we walked into the North Texas Hacker Sports Center here at Pilot Point, my building, September 15th, 2000. And I fell in love with it immediately. It was a lot of fun. It was a small gym. I got to know everybody right away. I still remember my first day. I was super nervous and excited. And my parents told me, you can pick this or you can pick baseball. And I picked gymnastics. That was September. I think by December, I was on the competitive team. I had some talent. They were taking boys because there's always a lot fewer boys. And so I just fell in love with it super quick. I jumped in with both feet and never looked back. Usually a rec kid gets noticed by the competitive coaches, and they approach the parents and say, hey, have you thought about this? Your kid is athletic and they would do well here. So usually it's something more like that. But for me, it was, hey, how do I do more of this? I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome that you're passionate and your talent coincides with that. That's a good combination.
It is.
Okay, so let's transition back to the business questions. What is, generally speaking, someone who's interested in maybe opening up a gym, what would be a manageable expectation as far as entry-level salary, and then maybe the range kind of we're looking at for opening up a gym?
That's a tough question because there's a range, and it can be like any other self-employed job. It's like asking how much can you make washing windows? Well, you can be broke or you can make $1 million. It just kind of depends. So I can tell you what I know is average, but there's a difference between what's average and what's typical. Average is a mathematical averaging. Typical is what is more likely. So there are those gym owners that make tons and tons of money, 6 figures plus. I don't know any of them personally. Those guys usually have huge gyms, 80,000 square foot gyms the size of Walmart distribution centers in mega parts of some gigantic city. Chicago or Dallas or something like that. What is typical is probably in the 20 to 70 range. Average is probably 50. And a large part of that, I think, is due to a broken business model from the 1970s that is still in place today that most people have not kind of found their way out of. The average age of a gym owner is rising. I would say is probably 50 years old or older, with a couple of guys like me skewing it low. But most established gym owners that have made it are 40s, 50s, 60s, even husband and wife teams. So they figured it out a long time ago. It's working for them. They haven't had to change it much. But for the new guys like me, we're questioning everything and trying to change things as much as we can so that it fits us for our own family's sake and for the sake of just being around to serve the community for coming decades.
Yeah, I hear a lot about that. Business gurus saying, especially with the trades, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, you have a lot of business owners that will be aging out in the next 5, 10, 15 years, which is going to leave a vacuum of opportunities for maybe some younger, motivated people to come in. It sounds like the tumbling, trampoline, gymnastics gym might be also one of those examples of owners that are going to be aging out soon. And people are still going to have the desire to train and participate in those kind of sports. So that's an interesting market to kind of pay attention to.
Yes, I'm seeing it already. People aging out. There were usually the typical owner profile was usually an athlete in high school or college. They loved it. They opened a gym. They got married, had kids. They raised their kids in the gym. Their kids graduate high school, and that's about the time the interest starts to wane. They're starting to get, the kids are grown and gone. It's not serving their family directly in the same way that it always had. Maybe now they've got grandkids and they're kind of shifting into grandparent mode. And so they're typically wanting to be done or pass it on at that point.
Yeah, that's interesting. Tyler, when we're talking about Apex as a business owner, and you wear a lot of hats, I'm sure, just for that one specific role, what does your average day look like?
Sure. My average day is waking up at 6:30. I've usually got kids to kind of get ready for the day, and we homeschool, so we have a lot of flexibility, but I'm working out usually at 8:30 in the morning. My wife and I go do CrossFit together in our building, right next door to Apex under the same roof. And so we pack up all three of our kids, get the breakfast, the protein shakes, all that kind of stuff, hustle and bustle out the door. And then after that, depending on what is on the to-do list, I will either stay there on site and just walk over to the office, having packed my lunches and dinners and things like that for the day, and start my work. There could be some errands to run. Usually we have a plan of when we're doing Bible with the kiddos, and that'll either be before the workout or lunch, depending on what the schedule for the day is. Gymnastics is mostly an after-school activity. There are things like preschool programs and trying to think. Even some gyms house homeschool co-ops and things like that, so they have some daytime activities. But for us, we start around 3:30, 4 p.m. and run until 8. I'm protective of my time, so Fridays are my Saturday. So we run classes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evening, and then Saturday mornings. And Saturday afternoons are for camps and birthday parties and things like that.
Going back to a comment you made earlier about the business model, what future trends are you seeing in the industry? And if you could tap into, we talked about this last week briefly, AI and kind of technology, how that's playing into your business model, or any trends also that you're seeing that are substantial in the industry.
Sure. AI is fascinating because of how potent it is. There's the upside and the downside. People who are using AI to escape critical thinking are doomed, and that's going to be very negative for society. You are always going to have a segment of folks who are looking for a shortcut because they're lazy, rather than on how to increase their productivity. And sometimes those are hard to distinguish which one you're looking at, but really it's more of an intent and a motive and a mindset of the user. So I use AI fairly frequently to think out loud, to figure out what the most important thing is in some of my own thoughts, and in terms of creating and producing content, because I have a brick and mortar location. I don't have a product that I can ship across the country and sell to anybody who's interested. I have a very limited demographic and a very limited geographic location for my physical business. People have to get in their car and drive, and that's, as far as businesses go, that's a lot of friction that has to happen before the kid walks in the door. So I'll use AI as part of marketing, things like that, in terms of crafting scripts or shortening things up for videos, coming up with content ideas, etc. Now there's even tools to help with video editing and things like that use AI. Really fascinating. But as far as the business model, because it's person to person, face to face, not a whole lot has changed. You still have to take care of people. It's still tricky sometimes because you're dealing with kids. You're dealing with an adult's two most important things: their children and their money, and you have to treat both very respectfully, obviously, and communicate that you're respectful of those and that you're a good manager of both of those.
Yeah, that's interesting. So Tyler, you've been doing the Apex for about 14 years. What is the best part of your job, and what do you find the most challenging?
The best part of my job is teaching kids flips all day and helping them learn to human, as I call it. When you're dealing with an 8-year-old, for example, no matter how talented they are, they're still just 8. They still know very little about the world. They still have a lot of fear to overcome. They still need to be the kind of person who can overcome challenges and have the mental toughness and the grit and the determination and all that kind of thing in their life as a person, regardless of what sport they're pursuing. So that's very rewarding for me, is watching athletes overcome something difficult and grow into the people that will one day be successful because of the character traits and the physical disciplines that they've been able to accomplish and endure and pursue. The most frustrating part of the job is exactly the same thing. It's very challenging. I mean, people are not finished products ever. People are not widgets off an assembly line, and so they're never really done, if that makes sense. In a lot of jobs, you have a sense of satisfaction because, you know, the plumber or the builder or whoever can step back, dust off his pants, and put his hands on his hips and admire his handiwork. And when you're dealing with people, you never really get that. You're never done. And so there's a much different mindset of this ongoing process that can be very exhausting.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what would you say the most stressful thing about your job is?
Personally, for me, it's taxes and dealing with the government. I like as little government oversight as possible in my business, but it's very, very frustrating watching how much impact I'm able to have in our community and watch the local, state, and then even federal government want a piece of that. It takes from my family. It takes from the gym kids. It takes from me pouring that money back into the business. And that's one of the, personally, a very frustrating element for me. May not be for other people.
Can you give me an example of what you're talking about? When you talk about taxes mainly, or anything other than any particular thing?
Sure. Just the government's, open hand, wanting a piece of whatever you have produced. And it's in really, you reward the hardest working people with a bigger tax bill. I'd be in favor of a flat tax or something like that. Certainly we should have no income tax. That's a podcast for a different day, I'm sure. But yeah, just let people who are doing a good work be unchained. Scripture has mentions multiple times to not muzzle the ox while he is threshing. And that is, you let the animal who is working and creating this benefit for you, let him eat. You don't starve him at the same time. And we do that with our most productive people. We've got them muzzled so they cannot taste the fruits of their labor while expecting them to be really productive.
Have you ever thought about what else you would like to do or what you'd be good at outside this industry?
I have thought about that quite extensively over the last 10, 15 years, and I have no idea.
Okay,
God put it,
that's fair.
God provided a way and put it in my mind at such a young age that really his providence has had me not have to ever find out the answer to that. I have other things that interest me now, but those are more recent. Just as I've grown as a man, as a husband and father, as my skills have increased, I have other things that are intriguing to me that I'd like to pursue someday. And I am pursuing already in some different areas.
Hey, Tyler, as we're talking, what would be the next step? If we have a listener who might be interested in doing kind of what you're doing, and they said, Tyler, how do I get into this? What would your recommendation be?
My recommendation would be to be very sure, because it is a tough industry. People's tastes and schedules are fairly fickle, and I would find somebody. My advice to somebody in any industry that they're thinking about getting into is find somebody who is what you are thinking about becoming, and shadow them for 6 weeks, and then decide if this is still for you. Because a lot of people get into a lot of things and realize this is not what I thought it was going to be. We do that in college. We do that with career choices. Some people are unfortunate enough to make it all the way through college, get the job they always wanted, and then realize, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be like. So if you can save yourself a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of heartache by just calling up somebody, showing an interest in them and what they do, and asking if you can help them, serve them, shadow them, work for them for free for 6 weeks, so you can make an educated decision about what you think you want the rest of your life to look like. And that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, and I would double down on that. I think that's great advice. And just reemphasize the intentionality behind it. Approach somebody and be very specific. This is what I'm thinking. Can you help me? Can I work for free? Can I be around you, with the intention of almost like courting a spouse? This is my intention, and can we be intentional with getting information and moving in that direction? I think people would respond well to that kind of assertion.
Sure.
And approach.
I've done it. I had a young man approach me several years ago and want to shadow me and ask me lots of questions and work for me for a time to determine whether or not this was a good fit for him. So yeah, I was happy to help him.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this, Tyler, kind of another segue. We've talked about your professional background. You were young and had the call to maybe open a gym and stuff. You pull the trigger, you do it. August 1st, 2011 is when you opened Apex. How long did it take before you finally felt comfortable being a business owner? And I know you're always learning, I understand that, but it's just as far as the learning curve, when did that kind of slow down a little bit and you felt like you could catch your breath a little bit?
That is a fun question. There's all kinds of things in different industries, but you tend to different experiences and different dynamics and things that happen over time. You get acclimated to them, and just like anything in a sport, I've seen this before. I know what this is like. You can tell when a relationship with an employee is sliding because you didn't recognize it years earlier and it slid really too far south, and then you had to deal with it, and you learn to recognize that much earlier on. Now, it's that way with parents and athletes and coaching gymnastics. It's that way with business. And so, I'm not sure exactly, but there comes a point where most of your problems are things you have seen before. And that's a really important threshold to cover. And just be thoughtful about what has happened to you. And am I going in circles here? Is God not having me learn my lesson, so he's bringing this and smacking me in the face with it again? That has happened far too many times to count. So you want to be the type of person who learns lessons quickly and then can recognize when this is happening again in the future, and then hopefully head it off at the pass or nip it in the bud.
Yeah, and that's a great reminder, I think, for young people and old people. Kind of what you said is you're going to make mistakes. So it's this understanding that a mistake is not a failure. It is an opportunity to learn, because mistakes, especially early on, they will happen. And don't be surprised if they do, because you're new and you're learning also. Don't be discouraged when things go awry.
Absolutely.
I ask all my guests this as we're closing. I appreciate your time. Are there any books, Tyler, that you're currently reading, or podcasts or ebooks that are on your nightstand that you're consuming right now?
The two most important books that I have read in this journey, I'll give you two and then a bonus one. The first one, the most foundational one, is called The E-Myth. I think it's Michael Gerber is the author.
The E-Myth Revisited.
The E-Myth Revisited, that's the one. And his thesis is kind of a case study in McDonald's. It's a fascinating book. It's very conversational. The whole book is written as if he's having this conversation in a bakery with an owner who's having a hard time and very frazzled. And so it reads like a storybook. It's very fun, engaging read. And his idea is that you're trying to create franchise systems and a model in any business that are repeatable. The goal is not to be McDonald's. Everybody knows McDonald's doesn't have good hamburgers. The point is that McDonald's produces the same hamburgers 365 days a year across the entire planet. The product is exactly the same, and you almost can't screw it up. That's the beauty of the McDonald's model. And if you're going to take care of people in your business, everybody says nobody cares as much as the owner does, which is true, but you can implement policies and standards for your employees that are as high as your own personal standards. And that's a big part of what that book is about. Highly recommend The E-Myth Revisited. My second pick would be a book called Profits First by Mike Michalowicz. Don't ask me to spell it. But a fascinating read about how to manage your money. One of the anecdotes that he gives in the story is that when you have a big, large dinner plate, you tend to fill it up. And when you sit down at the table, you tend to eat all of it. If you had done that with a plate that was, say, a third less large, you would fill it up and you would eat all of it. If you had been given a plate that was half as large, you would fill it up and eat all of it. And so in terms of income and profit management, he recommends that you have multiple bank accounts to put money in so that you don't eat all of it, because there's a lot in there. And that is a good way to say, if you have a payroll account and you have an income account and you have a taxes account. Well, if they're all together, you don't know which area of your business is overeating and drying up your resources. If the payroll account is very low, you can look at your app on your phone at a glance and go, oh, everything is fine except this. I need to allocate more here. And it's a very quick way of just checking the money daily with no new behaviors to be able to look and see what areas of your business are performing well or underperforming. Very smart, very intuitive, and a fun read.
Okay, and now for the free bonus.
My bonus is I think you can get a print booklet of this, but I have the audiobook version. It's only 45 minutes long. It's very short. It is called The Millionaire Booklet by Grant Cardone. I am not a millionaire, and I'm not Grant Cardone, but this book was the first crack in the darkness for me that opened my eyes as a business owner about 7 years ago. And I was trying to just do things differently, and I was really limited by my own understandings of what different could be. So it's more of an inspirational book. He was at an event, a fundraising event one night. I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but you get the general idea. Somebody donated $10 million or something like that to this charity event. And it was super important. I think it was for leukemia or something. It was a big deal. They were trying to hit this big fundraising goal, and some guy at the end, they had raised $250,000. Everybody had reached as far as they could. And then one guy, stood up and wrote this humongous check. And he said, I have a moral obligation to be that guy someday. I want to be able to be that guy. And I want to be able to take care of that many people in that important of a way. And so that book was, he went straight home and wrote that book in a couple of hours. Very inspirational, very helpful to me in terms of his thinking about money. One of the stories from that book is that when he was a child, he was going to the drugstore or something and walking with I think it was his grandfather. And he was playing with his pocket change. He had a quarter. He was going to buy something at the store, gum or whatever, and he dropped it and it rolled down a drain. And rather than, the typical dad or granddad thing as well, that's why you shouldn't be playing with your money, son. His grandfather said, son, the problem wasn't that you lost your quarter. It was that it was your only quarter.
Oh, interesting.
And so he has a number of things like that from early on that kind of shaped his thinking. So The Millionaire Booklet by Grant Cardone, highly recommend. Very fun.
Okay.
Read.
I'll check that out. Yeah, in 45 minutes. That's doable for sure.
Easy listen.
Okay, Tyler, wrapping up. I know you're busy. Really appreciate your time. One last question, and this is extremely open-ended, and you could take it wherever you want to go with it. One piece of advice for the listeners. What do you got for me?
I'm only 37, but I'm going to die. And I don't want to have certain kinds of regret in my old age. I don't want to wonder if I could have worked harder, or if I could have solved that problem. At the same time, I want zero regrets regarding my family and the way I handled my business. I do not want to wonder if God is pleased with me. My salvation is through the work of Jesus Christ, but I still want my Heavenly Father to be pleased with me. And so I would say, aim at the highest possible good you can conceive of in terms of how you spend your life, and get as close to that as possible. And if that takes reorientation every couple months or couple years, that's perfectly natural as you grow. But live in a way that causes you to have little to no regret on your deathbed.
Tyler, how do you handle self-disappointment? Because with such a lofty standard and a goal, there's no way we can live up to that. However, we try, we strive. In those moments where you fail, what is your self-talk like, and how do you deal with that?
Lots of things have two sides, like coins. And so on one side of the coin, it's impossible to live in such a way that you will not have regret of some kind. At the same time, it is also possible to live in such a way that you see certain issues coming and can solve that problem before it fully becomes real and manifests. And so if you can look around at how well or poorly other people are doing and use their successes and failures to guide yourself, it's possible to see a good deal of things coming. And so we're going to have pain in this life. I would like to have as little undue pain as possible. And so my self-talk looks like, well, I am young, I have tried to be wise, and I just did not see this one coming. I don't think I could have. So the Lord is bringing this to me as a learning experience. My job is to learn it right and learn it good, ideally the first time. If I have seen this problem before and should have seen it coming, then the Lord is reminding me that I have not yet mastered this particular area and need to continue being more watchful and diligent in that area. So in one sense, you can be very hard on yourself, and in another sense, you can be very forgiving of yourself. The Father is forgiving, and the Father is hard as well. And so what really matters the most is how you respond to it.
Man, that's good. I know you've said multiple times you're young. You're 37, but you've got some knowledge in you, in your head and your heart, and that's good information. Hopefully that lands well with the listeners. Tyler Terrell, I find it almost impossible to stick to my 30-minute time frame, but this conversation was awesome. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for your insight. Thanks so much for what you're doing for your community and being intentional with Apex, and as a husband and a father. You're doing great, and you're an inspiration to a lot of people. So thank you for that. And I can't wait. I'll make sure I stop by. Our kids go to the CrossFit gym. Our kids go to Apex, so I'm sure I'll see you around. But I appreciate your time today.
Sounds good. Thanks, Clay. My pleasure.